So, like I said, that's just a small portion of the book. It's a novel, so there's a lot more to it. It does get a little bit hard for me to read sometimes, just because of layers upon layers of psychological stuff that I'm dealing with a counselor and everything else. So, but like I said, we have a few minutes. I'd like to thank you all once again for coming. And like I said, this book is really dependent upon people buying it, people reviewing it. Give me a bad review. I'm writing another book. I'd love to hear what I can do. I'd love to hear what I could do better next time. It's like, I really would encourage you to, like I said, if you enjoy it, review it, pass the word along to your friends. And again, like I said, it's a really great thing that Ryan's been doing with Knuckledown Press. So, without further ado, I guess I'd like to, if you have any questions. Yes.
Hi, how are you doing? Great job, man. I have a question to ask for my wonderful students that are here tonight. We're working on fiction right now, and I guess I would like to ask your advice. I mean, I write poetry predominantly, and I've made the shift to fiction. It's very hard, and so I know it must not be easy, but are there some basic things that you can think of that you have implemented that have helped you create your fiction that you could impart on these beginning novelists?
Especially with, are you talking especially with the switch from poetry to fiction?
No, just about fiction and things that they can do to kind of hone their skills a bit when they produce their own quality fiction.
Can one really call this fiction?
Well, there's layers of truth underneath it, but every character is not there's no, it's the typical disclaimer, any resemblance to real people is coincidental, I would say. Ray Bolcook, Jerry Mueller, every character in this book
But
is...
what you're trying to tell us about is not fiction.
I would say the truths behind it.
Tell us about has a basis in reality, a very strong basis in reality.
Oh, I would say this leads back to, and I'll get back to, this is a great question, and we'll get back to what you asked as well, for sure. I talked to somebody about this, why didn't I just write a memoir, or why didn't I write a fictional account, or a non-fiction account of what happened over there to my company? And I think it goes back to what you said. I think I had so much more freedom to change things because there's a lot of boring stuff that happens as well. But
Graham Greene called some of his work entertainment. Most of what are called novels are not. They're born of his experiences there, and they're ways that he chose to encapsulate both his experiences and its effect upon him. But they're not really fiction in the sense of, this morning I'm going to make up a story. This isn't made up.
I would say the difference, as far as Graham Greene is concerned, and I'm not even sure if I can say it's much different. You might have a very solid argument right there. I would say using fiction allowed me to write with authority a story that, because I'll say that none of this actually happened in this book, but it all did actually happen in different ways. And it allowed me to tell the story of not only myself, it allowed me to, especially to remove myself from it, and it allowed me to tell a story and not my story, if that makes any sense. And like I said, I think you're making some really valid points about the line between truth and fiction, or the line between nonfiction and fiction. And I would say that, like I said, if you read Tim O'Brien, it's the same kind of a thing. There's real truth and story truth, and I'm trying to go for story truth. I hope I've gotten somewhere close, but like I said, it's the first book, and I'm still working on it.
You got there.
Does it? Does that answer your question?
I'd say you got there.
Well, thank you. And Kevin, as far as the question about beginning fiction, I'm gonna start with the thing that everybody says and that nobody wants to hear, but I've rewritten it about 500 times. And then I said, you know, Ryan and I work together. It's a lot of polishing. And that's something that everybody tells you, so I'm gonna say that quickly. And then I'm gonna be done with saying that. Because you don't need to hear that. I'm sure you've heard that already from Kevin about just the revision is truly a crucial thing. But I will say, it didn't work for me, especially when you're starting out. I think you want to write conflict stories. Like, you want to write the story where there's going to be a big confrontation at the very end. Like, kind of like the stories you've read all your lives, where it builds up to the story arc. And I think that's important, but I think you have to really work at making sure that some of the conflict that is there in your characters and the characters that you're creating is inherent in the story. You don't need to make it so obvious sometimes. It's there, and then I said, I don't think necessarily, when I started writing fiction, every story ended with a big bang. Every story ended with somebody storming out of the room in a huff, or somebody in a fight. And that's, and when you reread even some of the great fiction writers, when you read some of those short stories, it's not necessarily about that. It might appear to be about that way, and there might be a great twist at the end, but try to work on your characters more than that big twist. And I'm not saying that plot won't come into it, but really focus on, get the story going, of course. I want you to get the story going, but I think if you try to force that big conflict, and you just don't let the inherent conflicts that should be there in your characters' lives, we've all got conflicts. I have to be at work tomorrow morning, or tomorrow in the afternoon. I don't want to go. It's a conflict. And, I think you should let those natural conflicts flow, and let those characters kind of, let those, every character, when you think about it, there's a lot of conflict that's already present, and you can really use that. Use that to your advantage. So, it's something that like I said, I learned it the hard way, and it took a lot of writing. So, but thanks. I'm glad I could talk a little bit about it.
Appreciate that.
So,
what's your next book about then?
the next book is, I'm just starting it, and I'm this close to just writing a screenplay, because the way I'm seeing it in my brain right now is like that. It's feeling much more like a movie, but the age-old question, we're told, whether it's, I know some of the more theological people here, whether it's thou shalt not kill or thou shalt not murder, that's a commandment that a lot of us are grown up with, and that's a human ideal, and then you're over there and you're asked to sometimes to kill people. And whether or not, like I said, whether or not that whole commandment, and so the next book involves a chaplain and a chaplain's assistant. And I'm really taking advantage of my drill times to grill the chaplain in our company about what his life is like. So that's kind of like, I'm at the research point right now, and I'm sort of fleshing out where I'm going to try to go with it. But I don't want to write, I don't like writing with necessarily like the story already outlined and put in place. So, but I really want to focus on that whole, the spiritual aspect of it, and how sometimes that gets so distorted, and how sometimes that changes so much. So that's really the theme of what I'm working on right now. So I don't want to talk about it anymore because I'll jinx it. So anything else? Brian?
I'm curious, given your background in poetry, did you ever write out any of this in verse at all?
I never did, and especially like not verse, like line or meters or anything
Sure,
like that.
okay.
But through revision and through, I feel like I like to write, and especially when I do read aloud, when I'm testing out a draft and I'm just sitting in, a back room somewhere or whatever, reading it, I like it to flow, and I like it to flow like poetry, if that makes any sense. And so I really work on that. So, but I don't do like, never did I put it to like any sort of, rhythm or anything, any sort of formal stuff. All right, well, if you're
Hat or cat? Hat or cat?
at or cap?
Hat, H-A-T or cat? when she ran out into the rain in her hat or in her cap?
That's a good question. I'll have to take a look. Why do you ask?
You're in camp. Few people have hats, they have caps.
Oh, let me see here. If it's I might want to change that. We might.
It's an equal.
Well, it should be cap. So if it's hat, that's.
Phrase it. Phrase
Well,
the line.
I'll definitely have to take a look at that. Maybe I'll make the first. I'll email you about it in the morning. So, let's see here. Well, thank you. I'll take that into account and I'll make a revision. I thought her hat sounded a little okay, but her cap cuts the line and ends it. So, yeah, excellent. Well, like I said, Amanda, did you have a question?
Hello, brother. I was wondering how much, I guess, because I know you because you're my brother. How much of your characters are just like, are completely just pulling from people that you are, I mean, you have a postal worker, but at first I think that character is you, but then he's a postal worker, so it's dad, and so then, you know what I mean, but then he has you know what I mean, so I'm wondering how much of that is going on actually, like, with everybody, or is it?
A lot of it comes from, it's just a lot nicer for me to use things that I know about.
Yeah.
And Ray Bocook is not dad.
I know, I thought it was you.
But there's always parts of me in each character. I think that's kind of tough. It's tougher to avoid until I get to be a lot better as a writer, I think.
Yeah,
to avoid
well,
where I'm in there somewhere.
I don't think that's a bad thing at all, actually.
But it helps that I have.
Crazy family.
Well, no. It helps that I have a number of.
Experiences.
Yeah, a number of experiences. And in order to write with authority about something, I think you have to have at least some. You got to either, if you don't know it, you got to research it and you got to learn it. And so, like the mailman, Dad's mailman his whole life. I can write with a little bit of authority on that, just a tiny bit, not too much. So, but I have been into the back of the post office. I know what the back side of the post office looks like. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, it's something to relate to.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how much of that because it just seemed like every character, I was like, I can see, you know what I mean, the names and stuff.
Oh yeah. I mean, it is. There's no one way to do it though.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
They come from somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and each somewhere is different each time, and then you just try to grab onto them and get them on the page. All right, well, I'm ready to be done, and there's an open bar here. I'll be here and willing to talk. I'd appreciate it if you guys stuck around a little bit, and like I said, feel free to order a drink or two. She's been over here sitting so nice through the reading, and it's everybody, give her a couple tips. So, all right, thank you.